How to stop cheating yourself out of happiness. How many of you have ever felt blue? Let's have a show of hands. And how old were you when this first happened? Were you this high, or that high? When I was 7, I was sent to boarding school and I felt very lonely. I missed my family and childhood friends. Have you ever felt that way? Not being able to connect? Just feeling totally unhappy? And have you also fallen into the trap of saying, if only I got the perfect job, the perfect relationship, the perfect object, then I'd be happy? Or perhaps the perfect body when I lost 10 pounds or gained 15. I don't know. But those are the traps we fall into when we cheat ourselves out of happiness. Those are some of the traps. And after a while, habituation sets in and we get used to the things that we thought would make us happy. And guess what? We're right back where we started. Come with me as I share with you what I've learned about happiness from a young child to today, and with 35 years of experience as a clinical psychologist. In the 4th century BC, Aristotle said that the meaning of life was to be happy, or what he called eudaimonia, or getting meaning and purpose in life. And then if we looked at what Zhuangzi said in China at the same time, he said, happiness lies in the absence of the pursuit of happiness. Or to quote the Dalai Lama, and I like this one, he says, want what you have, not need what you want. Right now, we're recovering from a pandemic. We face the risk of future infections. There is attention addiction, or a tendency to focus on our devices and to be glued on these devices. The tendency to make inappropriate comparisons with others and to always find ourselves wanting in some way, so it affects our self-esteem. But yet there's another pandemic, and did you know what it was? It's environmental destruction, misinformation, and the Western view of us being an isolated, separate identity. We end up feeling a lack of control, a feeling of helplessness. And what if I told you that in 15 minutes, you can take back control of your life? You can stop cheating yourself out of happiness and get back agency and autonomy. You can do this in 15 minutes, like my patients have. That's all it takes, 15 minutes every day. Did you know your brain and mine has a happiness control panel? And you can access it and access your happiness on demand. That's what my research shows. And so, as a result of this, you start feeling better about yourself. When you do these things, you get an injection of dopamine, that feel-good chemical that makes us feel, oh, life is worthwhile after all. Now, isn't that exciting? Your happiness control panel is a tool that you can use to manage your emotions and to promote feelings of happiness. It happens through specific practices and behaviors. Here is a slide which shows you how to access your happiness on demand. You will notice that there are several buttons. Some of them you might not want to push, they're not appropriate to you. Some of them will be appropriate, such as noticing what's going on outside, noticing how good you feel when you take a walk outdoors, just for 15 minutes, noticing different colors, different nuances in the landscape. And at night you ask yourself which buttons worked on my control panel and why. And set yourself up for happiness tomorrow by choosing different buttons on awakening. So when you wake up, you don't automatically go for your devices. No, instead of that, you go directly to your happiness control panel and then you say to yourself, now what do I get to choose from me for today? One of the things I really enjoy doing, apart from the exercise button that we all know is good, is the self-compassion button. That's such an important piece, apart from noticing our emotions, what our thoughts are like, and letting them flow in and out in a mindful state. There is something called self-compassion. Do you know when you feel down, you have a tendency to write a story about yourself that's really, really viciously negative. You put yourself down. We say, oh, you're not good enough. Oh, you're such a failure. Look what happened now, so just forget it all. I say, instead of that, how about self compassion? How about saying to yourself, wait a minute in here, what proof do I have that I'm a failure? What does the data show? And what would a good friend of mine say to me if I were to do this? And learn to self soothe. When you're having a particularly rough time, can you do something good for yourself like some of my patients do? Some listen to music. Some of my female patients go to the spa. Some decide they want a massage. Some decide, I want to listen to music. There are so many choices that we can use just for 15 minutes. That's the power of self-soothing. More important, we learn not to be so harsh on ourselves. That story we brought from our childhood, is it necessary to use it today? Are there some other scripts that we need to create today for ourselves? And I tell you, you can if you use self-compassion. Use that button. And you realize all of a sudden you start, hey, I like myself. And guess what? Kind of understand what she's going through and he's going through. So we pass on kindness to others through self-compassion. We stop being so harsh and critical. And we look at the criticism as feedback, as a way to grow, as a way to move forward, to bounce forward. And that's good. So it reminds me of John. John was a 50-year-old patient of mine. He lost his will to live. He said, why bother? So I said to him, what about trying that exercise button on your control panel? Go out in the green and tell me how that feels. Come back and tell me 20 new things that gave you joy. Take photos of it. And if you can't do that, then I guess I'm wrong. He came back with 21 pictures and he passed them on to Instagram, so other people started sharing their joyous memories with him. So guess what that did? He started smiling. They smiled back. He was priming his brain to find good things in his life, not just the pandemics I started talking to you about. He was creating a new script. Okay. Another thing he found out was the power of friendship. He looked at his friends. He decided post-pandemic, maybe now I need to do some spring cleaning in here. Some of these friends are not really friends. Maybe I need to change, to move with some and to call them up. And others, maybe we just grew apart. He felt compassion and he understood. So he started developing that social connection, which was so crucial for him because when he felt down, he went through that rabbit hole, went down into despair, and that was no good. So he learned to stop that as well. Self-compassion. Noticing is something that we talked about before as something that gives us the ability to notice nuances in our moods. When you create a new story about yourself, you're discarding some of the things in the past that don't make sense anymore, and you start noticing some other things that you want to bring into the script today. That leads to a feeling of acceptance, contentment, joy, and meaning. The research suggests that when you practice this skill, you start appreciating things and you start feeling better just by noticing and smiling. When you do that, you trick your brain into feeling good about yourself and other people because of the mirror neurons in the brain. They start mirroring that too. Isn't that fun? So I've talked about the how and the why. It's important for us to be happy. It's destined because we're programmed in our DNA to be happy. I've talked about some of the fuel that we use, such as noticing, smiling, self-compassion, but there are many more buttons on your happiness control panel that you can choose. These were just a few to share with you today. So come with me as I ask you to use the buttons to create a new story about yourself, one that does not involve defensiveness, one that involves joy, happiness, and growth. Bye now.